Before we get started with the topic of response to growth stimuli, specifically in our own bodies, we should first give a background or context about the much bigger concept that encapsulates the topic of response to growth stimuli. This is the concept of feedback mechanisms. Now, what are feedback mechanisms, you might ask? To explain it simply, feedback mechanisms are mechanisms in the body that happens to put back the systems into its homeostatic levels. Homeostasis is the state of balance in our body. This state of balance is essential throughout all parts of our body. For example, homeostasis may mean that our blood stays within a certain pH level range or our body temperature stays within a certain temperature range. Our body adjusts to the external factors that affect it in order to maintain homeostasis. This is made possible through feedback mechanisms present in our body. One example of feedback mechanisms working to maintain homeostasis can be seen when we sweat. Because our body gets hot when we do physical activities, our body produces sweat to cool ourselves down and maintain a certain temperature. However, feedback mechanisms also work the other way around. If our body gets cold due to cold external temperature, feedback mechanisms will cause our body to warm up. This is seen when we shiver and our blood vessels will constrict to increase the body's temperature. So in this video, we will discuss the feedback mechanism of the body's response to growth stimuli. To start off, let us first ask the question, what are growth stimuli? Well, to explain it simply, a stimulus can be described as a thing that results to a specific reaction to a certain tissue or organ. An example would be a stimulus that triggers physical or behavioral change to an organism. Given the definition of the term stimuli, we can determine that the meaning of growth stimuli is anything that results in growth or triggers growth, particularly in our bodies. Our bodies secrete growth hormones in order for us to grow. As you wonder about what stimulates this release, let's first think about what stimulates growth hormone release. So we're thinking about what could cause this system to begin. The things that stimulate growth hormone release and secretion include a high plasma amino acid level and a low plasma glucose level. It is also important to take note that growth hormones are also synthesized and secreted on a circadian rhythm. This means that during the nighttime, growth hormone is going to be high, so our bodies are synthesizing and secreting growth hormone while we're resting, and during the daytime, the body is not synthesizing and secreting growth hormone. Now, how are growth hormones synthesized? It starts with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is located at about the center of your brain. And we are going to focus on some neurons located in the hypothalamus called neurosecretory neurons. The neurosecretory neurons are responsible for synthesizing and secreting growth hormone releasing hormone, or GHRH for short. From here, the GHRH travels down the axon of these neurosecretory neurons and into the axon terminal. Growth hormone releasing hormone is then released from the axon terminal. It will then enter into the hypophyseal portal system, which is basically a capillary system that connects the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary. Then, it will be received by the receptors on the endocrine cells inside the anterior pituitary. After GHRH is received by the receptors on the endocrine cells, it will then signal the endocrine cells to start synthesizing and releasing growth hormones. After that, growth hormones will enter the systemic circulation. Once it enters into the systemic circulation, then it can go off and target certain tissues and organs. An example of an organ that it will target is the liver. When the growth hormone targets the liver, it targets some cells that will synthesize and secrete insulin-like growth factor 1 or IGF-1. And once growth hormone targets the liver, it will cause the synthesis and secretion of this IGF-1. Another term for IGF-1 is somatomedin. Insulin-like growth factor 1 or IGF-1 has two targets. These include the bone and cartilage and the skeletal muscle. Cell division and bone growth happens when IGF-1 targets the bone and the cartilage muscle. On the other hand, protein synthesis occurs when IGF-1 targets the skeletal muscle. Through the promotion of protein synthesis, skeletal muscle also grows. Overall, the synthesis and secretion of growth hormones and IGF-1 results in bone and skeletal muscle growth. Aside from the liver, growth hormone is also able to target other tissues. This is also important to tackle in the video because they lead to the feedback mechanism of response to growth stimuli. To start off, growth hormones also target the adipose tissue. When this happens, it results in lipolysis. Two products of lipolysis include glycerol and fatty acids. The glycerol can be converted into glucose by going into the liver, and then that glucose from the liver will be able to go into circulation. This will result in a higher concentration of glucose in the body's circulation. As said earlier, a low plasma glucose concentration is one of the stimuli for synthesizing and secreting growth hormone. With this, the feedback mechanism aims to increase the body's glucose concentration and bring it back to its normal range. Through the body's response, the fatty acids can also enter into circulation, and this will decrease the body's plasma amino acid level as well. Many other types of tissues can also be targeted by the growth hormone. When these tissues are targeted by the growth hormone or the GH, it decreases glucose utilization. If glucose utilization by the cells is decreased, this means that the cells are not going to be using up that glucose. This will result in the glucose level in the circulation to remain elevated. Given this increased plasma glucose and increased fatty acid levels in the plasma, it could give the body the energy that is required for growth. After the liver is done secreting IGF-1 and helping the body achieve homeostasis by lowering the plasma amino acid levels and increasing the plasma glucose levels to their normal range, it signals the body, particularly the anterior pituitary, to stop the secretion of growth hormone releasing hormones or GHRH, and this eventually results in the body stopping its secretion of growth hormones. The feedback mechanism repeats again when the body detects the stimuli for releasing growth hormones. These stimuli include a low plasma glucose level and a high plasma amino acid level. The feedback loop will continue until the body achieves homeostasis. To sum up the feedback mechanisms about the body's response to growth stimuli, several tissues and organs are acted upon by the growth hormone. These tissues and organs include the bones, muscles, adipose tissue, and also the liver, which is essential since it produces a type of growth hormone which is the insulin-like growth factor 1 or IGF-1 that helps in further modulating bone and muscle growth. IGF-1 provides a negative feedback to the pituitary, which limits growth hormone secretion. What stimulates the production of growth hormone, however, is GHRH, which is growth hormone releasing hormone. To wrap up the video, the body's response to growth stimuli is an example of a negative feedback loop. It counteracts the imbalance in the body and brings it to homeostasis by inhibiting or removing the stimuli, which are a low plasma glucose level and a high plasma amino acid level. The stimuli are removed as they are brought back to their normal state. As the body achieves homeostasis, then it will stop the secretion of growth hormones until it detects a stimulus. Let us list down the parts of the feedback loop of the body's response to growth stimuli. Starting off the list is the beginning of the loop, which is the stimulus or the factor that causes the feedback mechanism to start working. The stimulus for the feedback loop is a low plasma glucose level or a high plasma amino acid level. This will then be detected by the body and it will start the feedback. After the stimulus is the receptor. This is the one that gives information to the control center. The receptors that will send signals to the brain to release growth hormones and regulate the plasma glucose and amino acid levels are the neurosecretory neurons. They are responsible for synthesizing and secreting growth hormone releasing hormone, or GHRH for short. The GHRH or growth hormone releasing hormone will travel to the anterior pituitary, which will have endocrine cells that will receive the GHRH. The pituitary gland will then release the effector, which are the growth hormones that will target the tissues, organs, body cells, and fat that will all go through complex processes such as protein synthesis, which decreases the body's amino acid levels and help our bones and muscles grow. Or the body can break down fats through lipolysis, such as the adipose tissue, which results in an increase to plasma glucose level, and this helps the body achieve homeostasis. The goal of the feedback mechanism is to regulate the plasma glucose level and the plasma amino acid level of the body. It is also important to take note that through this process, the body will also grow because of the growth hormones and protein synthesis. That is all for today's video. Thank you for watching. I hope you like it and I hope you understand the complex feedback mechanism of the body's response to growth stimuli.